Hey, this is Lea McComas back in my studio in Colorado. I'm glad you joined me. This is going to be lesson 5 for the portrait quilt project. And you should have with you a stack of 5 fabrics in different values from very light to very dark and a big scary pile of pattern pieces. And so if you've got that, then we're ready to go for this week. The first thing that you're going to do is lay your pattern or your fabrics out from light to dark, and then take your pattern pieces, pick them up one at a time, look at the number and set it on the appropriate fabric. So you can see here I've got all my number 5 pieces on my darkest fabric. I've got my medium number 3 pieces piled up on my number 3 fabric, and my 4s and my 2s. And this way we're going to deal with one value at a time. And I'm gonna focus here on my number 2 pieces right now, because I have a big kind of really scary piece, and you might have something like this. It ends up being in a big loop. It takes up lots of space. It wants to move around. And it's kind of difficult to work with. This is a great big piece. If I fuse it onto my fabric, I'm gonna have these big holes in the middle, which is kind of wasteful because I'm really into conserving your resources. So here's what I'm gonna do. If you've got a big piece like this that winds and twists and turns all over, I'm gonna cut this one into smaller chunks. And I think 4 pieces would be good for this one. So I get out various highlighters. I like to be colorful. And I'm gonna pick a piece. There's a nice chunk of fabric right here, but I think I'd like to stop this piece. I look for a place where it's kind of narrow. That's nice. And I'm going to take my pink marker, for example, and I'm going to draw a little square there. Okay. And then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to snip right in the middle of it. So I'm going to take another color. I'm going to take green, and I'm going to go right up from that. And you know, I'm going to cut this apart again right here. So I'm going to put a big green spot, and I'm going to snip that right between. So now I have this piece. This is much more manageable. It's still a nice big chunk. It's much more manageable. And when I go to put it together with the other pieces, I know that when I get to right here, I'm looking for another number 2 piece with a pink spot on it. And up here I know I'm looking for the other number 2 piece with a green spot. So it's important. I'm going to cut this in several places. I'm going to go blue over here, right here. That'll be a good spot, I think. And I'm going to go, what haven't I used here? Pink orange. Orange, and I think I'm going to put orange right here. This will be a nice kind of break. And I'm going to put orange, a nice thin spot. There we go. So now you can look at that. Instead of having that one big scary piece, yeah, this is not so bad, right? This is not so bad. And then this one's kind of straight. That's more manageable. This one's still, you know, it goes out a little bit, but that's totally doable. So I'm going to put all these pieces back on my number 3 fabric. Now I will do that with maybe a couple of these scary number 4 pieces. My number 1 pieces look pretty good. I can work with those the way they are. So we're going to stop here. I'm going to move over to my ironing station, and you come along with me. Okay, now we're back over at the ironing station, and I brought all my number 3 pieces. I'm going to show you how to do this. And again, you take one piece of fabric at a time. I've laid them out so I can see them. I'm going to start with these long, kind of straight pieces. I'm going to lay them down here on the edge of my fabric and kind of hold them down with my fingers and adjust them so that I'm ironing this close to the edge, but not off. And then I'm going to take a hot iron and just lay it down on top of that and fuse it down. And if you start and then kind of slide your iron, you'll find that the pieces lay down. So you don't have to worry about where they go. I'm gonna iron that one a little longer. And we're using the freezer paper, so you know it has the waxy backing on it. That's what is gonna fuse to this fabric. And you know, it's not permanent, so that's not a big deal. I'm gonna get down here. And I've got some wonky stuff, so just take the tip of your iron, follow along the edge, and you'll find it starts to lay down. And I'm going to hold it here. Okay. All right. That piece is stuck down pretty well. Now, as you're moving this around later on, you might find that the pieces start to lift up a little bit. Not a problem. Just heat your iron up and go back and touch them and hold it back down. Okay. Don't let it get too out of hand. Now I'm going to go looking for another piece. I also like this kind of long skinny one because I think I can lay it right next to that. I want to make sure I'm far enough down I don't go off the top. And they like to lay down next to each other fairly well. Yeah. Okay, so this makes me think my sister and I, when we were younger, we sometimes had to share a bed, like when we went to my grandmother's to visit. And it was important that you could lay down comfortably, but don't touch each other. So that's what I think of when I'm ironing these pieces down. Okay. There. Now see, that piece is getting a little bit close, but I still think I can make that work. So if it didn't, I would peel this up, move it over just a little bit, and iron it all back down again. And you can peel these pieces up and then re-iron them a couple of times. So it's going to be a little tight there. Hold that down, and I think you're kind of getting the hint. You've got to be a little patient here. You've got to give your pattern pieces a lot of TLC and a lot of heat without scorching. The next piece I'm going to use is this big one because I think I can nestle it right in here. And I generally work from the large or awkward pieces down to the smaller pieces. This doesn't seem to want to fuse down very well today. So when that happens, just be patient with it, work with it. And you might hear little footsteps. That's my dog Coco coming to visit. Hey girl. Coming to see what we're doing. And see if anybody might want to play catch with the tennis ball. Okay. If you start with the big pieces and you fill in the gaps, then when you get to smaller pieces like this, you can fill in the gaps with those. So I'm going to put this one here. One thing that's important to notice is where the arrows are. So this little piece that I've got has arrows pointing out, which means I'm going to need to leave extra fabric all around the edge of this piece. So I don't want to put it right next to the edge of another piece, especially if that piece had red arrows. They would both need about a 1/4 inch seam allowance left. This is going to fit well inside of here because the inside of this piece has no arrows. So I'm going to be cutting it off right next to the paper. This one I can put in the middle and I have plenty of room for some seam, or for some extra. I guess it's not a seam allowance because we're not going to stitch seams on this, but I think you know what I'm talking about. So we're going to iron these. Okay. Now, just for the sake of time, pretend like I have already ironed all these other pieces on and I fit my little pieces in there. Okay. And now I know how much space that's all going to take up. I'm going to come out with a roll of adhesive backing and put on the back of this. And what I like to use is a Steam-A-Seam product, and I use Steam-A-Seam Light 2. And here's why. With Steam-A-Seam, you can attach it to the back, you peel off the paper, it's a little sticky. So when you go to put the pieces together, they'll stick to your backing fabric. But if you don't like where you put them the first time, you can peel them up and put them back down. You can move them around. There's just enough stickiness to the back of them that you can work with it. I find that other adhesives, if they don't have that tacky backing to them, they tend to slide around, and in order to hold them in place, you have to iron them. With Steam-A-Seam, you can touch it with an iron. It's not permanent until you use steam. So you can still hit it with an iron, hold it in place, But if you find out later that you got it in the wrong spot, you can still peel that up, move it around. It's not permanently fused. So Steam-A-Seam products come in packages where you can buy individual sheets, about 8.5 by 11, the size of a piece of typing paper, or typing, do we even call it typing paper anymore? Copy paper. But I use a lot of it, so I buy mine on the roll. And once I have my pieces laid out, I'll just lay this down, get an idea of how much it's going to take to cover the back. I can see right here. So I'm going to take my scissors and cut that off, cut a piece that I know will cover the back of my pattern pieces. Get that out of the way. Pretend all of those are fused on. All right, the magic of video. And I'm gonna flip this over. I'm gonna peel one layer of the paper off of my fusible. Yeah, easy for me to say, right? Okay, there it goes. Peeling this off. This is sticky, and you know what we do with this? That's right, we do an Eleanor Burns, and we throw it back there. And I'm gonna lay this down. Now this is pretty sticky on its own, and you can just kind of hand press. If I'm cutting out a lot of little pieces, maybe narrow pieces, I find that things tend to want to pop loose. So I'll go back and get my iron, no steam, really important. Dry iron, no steam, and I'll just iron this. Run the iron out of it, not a lot, but just give it a little bit of heat to make it stick down a little bit better. Okay, then I'm done with this section. I'll take this back over to my cutting table and I'll lay it out, and with a pair of scissors I'll cut around. I'm going to cut very close along these edges that don't have red arrows. Okay. Oh, sometimes where I see the orange line, I give it a little extra that's going to fall off the edge, because I know that's the edge of the quilt, so I might give it a little extra there too. I'm going to cut around here, maybe a little bit extra there. When I get to this side, definitely going to leave about a 1/4 inch. And see where it tucks back down in here? Love cutting around this because I just ignore that, leave it filled in, and come up and start going. Now it's a little bit tight here, so I'm going to hug right next to that pattern piece. I'm not going to have a lot sticking out, but it's going to stick out on both sides of this narrow finger-like piece. And I'll come up. As long as I'm cutting right close to the edge of here, gives me a little room to overlap on this piece. So those things will work. Same thing right here. Be sure you cut close to this edge and you leave all the extra fabric attached to this edge. So you know what, let's stop here. We're gonna do this each piece of fabric, all 5 values. And then let's stop here and come back over and join me at my cutting table, and I'll show you what those pieces look like when you're done cutting them out. Come on over. Okay, back at the cutting table, I have some pieces that are cut out, and I just want to show them to you to kind of know what to expect when you're cutting your pieces out. So this is a very light piece, a number 1 fabric, and what you can see is because it's the lightest piece, it's going to tuck under everywhere it goes, and so I've got red arrows all the way around. I have extra fabric all the way around. And that's pretty typical for your number 1s. The opposite of that is your number 5 pieces. Because it's the darkest, it will sit on top of lighter fabrics, and so you almost never have extra fabric on your number 5 pieces. So kind of keep that in mind as you're cutting them out. Everything in the middle, you know, is a mixed bag. Here's a number 4 piece. I cut it close along here, but I leave extra fabric along here. And you'll find that with 2, 3s, and 4s, it's a mix. Okay, some other things to pay attention to. Here on this number 5 fabric, there's a 4 spot. And that's a little spot, and I didn't go in there and cut that piece out, but you know, how hard is it to just make that piece up? So when I'm all done cutting out, I'm gonna have little scraps of fabric like this left, and I'm just gonna take my scissors later on and kind of cut a shape that's roughly that size and that shape, and I'll just peel it and stick it on later. But that's for another week. Don't even worry about that this week. When you see little spaces like that, or look, little spaces like this, yeah, that piece is right here. And so I'll just cut that out and put it on it later. Okay, you'll also sometimes find spaces like this. When I cut out this number 4 fabric, okay, let me get it up a little bit. There's a hole missing here. And I have arrows telling me that this is the lighter fabric. So someplace in my pile of pieces now is going to be a dark number 5 that fits right there. But I'm not going to bother to cut this out. It's just going to be the backing, and that small piece will lay right on top of here. And the same thing here and here. So if you've got, you know, it's only about a 1/2 inch space, don't worry about cutting that out. Just leave it solid. And it will help make the piece a little more stable later. Okay? All right, so your homework this week is to cut out all your pieces and again, have them in piles, and we'll be ready to start fusing them together next week. When you get all your pieces cut out, give us a shot of your fabric pieces, show us how that went, and then post them online, and that enters your name once again for the drawing that we're going to have at the end of this project, at the end of the 8 weeks. And we're going to draw a name, and I'm going to make a portrait quilt for someone. Maybe it's going to be you. And so I know that this lesson is over because my little dog Coco is back with her tennis ball, and she is scratching at the legs of the camera woman. So I'm going to send you off to do your work, and I'm going to go play catch again.